Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of T-Dog RC, and this is episode 2 of my RadioMaster series that I'm currently doing at the moment. And today's video is going to be taking a look at what I would call the base setup of my RadioMaster. So what I mean by that is it doesn't matter what model I'm flying, particularly thinking about fixed wing, but does also apply to drones in some instances, although for drones I tend to use my RadioMaster Zorro rather than this TX16. What I'd like to go through is the settings that I use, as I've said, for every model. So it doesn't matter what the model is, I always sort of have a base setup of functions and the way I have the screen and all that sort of stuff every time. So everything's familiar and I've got all the things that I need in place to fly, if you like. So that's what I'm going to be going through. Hopefully you'll find this interesting. It's probably more relevant to beginners of the hobby or people who've perhaps just got a RadioMaster, but of course other people that are well experienced with RadioMasters and flying, you may well find a few tips. So first thing I'm going to go through is the way I have my screen set up, and obviously this is very sort of subjective and different things are going to work for different people, but at least this is how I do it anyway. So I always have my timer there in the top left. Then I have some channel monitoring, so I can just easily see that I've got the right movements, and also that is quite an easy way for me to tell whether I've got dual rates on, because as you can see there, it's not moving all the way. Because I've got some dual rates enabled. And then I just like to have the image of the model on there as well, and the name. And if you want to actually change this, all you do is hold the telly button down, and then that takes you to this menu, which allows you to set up the widgets on the screen. You can change the different layouts, so you've got full screen there. You've got the one I use, which is split into 3, and then one that's split into 2, and then another one that's split into 4. And then once you've selected the layout that you want, then just go down to set up widgets, and then that takes you to this screen, and this is where it highlights. It's probably quite hard to see on the camera, but basically for the one that's active, it's a solid bar around it, and then the 2 that are inactive, it's got a dotted line around it. So the solid bar at the moment is around the picture, and if I wanted to, I can click on that, select a widget, and then now you can see I've got some arrows next to that, so it will let me change what I want. So I could have all the outputs on there, for example, and just go through and choose the different options to find the one I like. But as I say, I like using the model image. I should say as well that I'm using OpenTX on this, but a lot of these things apply as well to Edge. I have got Edge TX running on my RadioMaster Zorro, but on my TX16S I've just kept it with OpenTX. I've had no issues with OpenTX, so I've kind of got no reason to upgrade, especially with it being my fixed wing controller as well. So that's how I go about setting the screen up. So I've got those things there that I like to see. You can also change the colour of the timer as well, but I like to have mine on sort of a bright green colour. So that's the screen layout that works well for me. So then the next thing to have a look at is how I set my switches up. And again, I always follow the same format, so there's no confusion for me. When I'm flying a model, I know where everything's going to be. And that's what I'd recommend you have a think about doing as well. And obviously, again, it's going to be totally different for different people on which switches they want to do which things. But what I tend to find is things on the front here, so these 4 switches, I will use for something that potentially if I switched it, it could crash the model. So for example, throttle arm, I use this one. Obviously, if I flick that mid-flight and it cuts the throttle, then that's going to cause me a problem. These switches up here on the shoulders are things I tend to use for functions, so that might be flaps, it might be landing gear, all that sort of stuff. I'm just going to go through the ones I use, and that's how I like to fly my models, but as I say, that might be completely different for you. So what I tend to do is I have this SD switch. This is usually my throttle arm, and I'll show you how to set these things up as well in a few minutes. So I always have this one, so by default when it's up like that, then the motor's not going to work. Even if I hit the throttle, it's constantly disarmed. So then to fly the model, I need to put that switch all the way down, and then that arms the motor. And again, that's an important safety feature that I always like to have enabled. And then for dual rates, I tend to use this switch here. So this is SB, this is a 3-position switch, and again, this is really so it's not easy for me to catch, because with some models, if they're very sensitive and you caught that and you enabled full rates, it could cause you a problem, and you might struggle to control it. So I have my dual rates set up on there, and then moving to the shoulders. This switch, which is a momentary switch, I tend to find that quite handy to have set to reset the timer. So I always have a timer. Particularly important, obviously, with battery models, because you want to know how much juice you've got left in the battery. So I often use a timer for that. And an easy way to reset it is I just set a command, and I just do that, and that will reset the timer for me. Then SG on the right shoulder here, I tend to use this for flight modes. So if I've got a stabilizer in the model, then that is going to be like standard, stabilized, return to home, that sort of thing. If I've got undercarriage, retractable undercarriage, then I'll use SF, because that's a 2-position switch, and obviously that's retracts up, that's retracts down, and then SE I tend to use for flaps. So obviously 3-position flaps are set up on there. This particular model at the moment, the Extra 300, I don't really use any of these things up here for that, so I've got no voice commands running either, but I'll show you on a different model. I do like to set up voice commands, and again I'll show you how to do that in an easy way, because obviously when you can't look at the screen or you can't look down, it's good to know which switches you're switching and what position they're in. So in terms of actually configuring the switches, I'm going to show you how to set things like the timer and throttle cut and that sort of stuff, because again this is kind of my base setting. Like I say, to actually set things up on channels, so like the landing gear channel and all that sort of stuff, I'll cover that off in a different video, but this is more something called global functions, which I would use in every single model. So let's go into that. So hold model down, page across, so it's actually special functions, sorry. I go into this, and then this one as an example, that's my first one there, so I've got that as set as special function 1, and it's set to SH down. The function is to reset, and what it's going to reset is timer 1. So let's just push that up to the screen a bit so you can see. So that's how I have that set, and I've got it enabled. So that just means that when I press that, it's going to reset the timer for me. So I've just changed the model because I realised that one I was showing you, which is I'd got the timer reset set up on that one, but because that one was a nitro model, I hadn't really got things like throttle arm and that sort of stuff set up. So I've just changed to another model that's an electric model, so I can show you a bit better. So this was the first thing I've set on here. So I've used SF1 on this one, and I've used this switch, like I say, the SD switch on this front section. So what I've done there is when it's in the up position, like this, it overrides channel 3, which is the throttle channel, and it overrides it with a value of -100. So all you would do to do that is you hold this down to actually edit it, and then you can, and then if you click again on the wheel so it's flashing like that, that means you can edit this now. So I can actually use the switch to set this, so I don't need to. You can scroll through and select what you want the switch to be and in which direction, but it's a lot easier if you actually just flick the switch to where you want it to be. So I want this to be up like that, and then go across to the next one. So we'll move on to what I actually want it to do, and in this case it's override, but obviously if you select that and flick through it, there's all sorts of things you can do. So I want it to override, and then what channel do I want it to override? I want it to override channel 3 because that's my throttle channel. So I'll select that and then move across to the value, and then just wind it down to -100. So it's as off as it can be, basically on -100, and then you just have to go across to this little square here just to enable it. So I'll just show you that close up there. That's how that looks. And basically what that's telling the RadioMaster is whenever that switch is in that up position like that, it's going to override the throttle with -100. So even if you knock this by accident, it's not going to start the prop going. So then when I want to fly, I just flick this down, and normally I would have that say arm as well. So let me just quickly set that up so you can see that. So we'll go down to special function 6, it's going to be a new one. And we'll also say when this position is in the down position, we want to, and then we're going to select play a track. We'll go along, and then we've just got to find the track that we need, which can sometimes take absolutely ages because there's lots here. And we're going to select armed. And then if we test that now, so in that value there, because we've got SF1 set to -100, it's not armed. And then when I push that down like that, it's going to be armed. So that's how you set the sounds up. And then with this particular model, I do have a flight controller on it because it is an FPV model. So I've just set, I usually use this switch, as I've said, for my different modes. So again, I've just selected the track that I want to play depending on what mode it's in.
Manual mode, stabilize mode, return to launch.
So it's just easy to know where you are with that. And you can do the same thing, like I say, you can add, so if I'd got flaps on this, I'd add the same thing, so it would say flaps up, flaps medium, flaps down, and then gear down, gear up, so you know where you are, like I say, without having to look at the controller. So that's how I set my switches and set the tracks on them. As I say, I'm not going to go into how you actually configure the switch to a channel, all that sort of stuff. That's done in mixing, but I'll go through that in a different video. But what I will show you, because again, it's one of my base settings, is my dual rate switch, which is always going to be this one for me. And I'll just show you how to set dual rates. So we'll go back to the start. Then we'll go across to inputs. And then it's the input screen where you want to set your dual rates, and it's a little bit like using the special function. So again, you can use the switch that you want to use to set your dual rates. And in this example, the first input is the aileron. So you go in and you can edit that line. So that takes you into this input menu. And then what you would do is you would first of all select your switch. So you highlight the switch and then choose whichever switch you want to use. And in my case, this is the minimum dual rate. So I want to use SB and I want it to be in the up position. So I would just flick that down and back up. So you can see there it's saying SB with an up arrow. So that's selected that switch. And then I can go through and change things like expo, set the expo up, and also set the weight up, which is the actual dual rate. So I have my dual rates, I keep it fairly simple. I usually have 25%, 50%, and 100%, or in some cases I'll have 50, 75 and 100. On this particular model it's very sensitive, so I've got my minimum rate set to 25%. But I would just set that to whatever value I want with that switch up. So that's set that dual rate now. And then I do exactly the same thing on the elevator. So go into that elevator one and edit it. And again, select the switch position and then go through and set my expo and my weight. So on this example, you can possibly see there, I've actually got the weight set to 50% on the elevator because it's not as sensitive as the ailerons. And again, that's for that position. And then when I want to set my mid rates, by default, you won't necessarily have you'll only have one line. So what you do is you hold the, so if we look at this throttle channel there, or the rudder one actually as an example, that I'll use that. You can see there's only one line and it's 100%. So I don't have any rates set on my rudder at all. But if I just set one up just to show you, I would hold edit down and I'd say insert after. And then select the switch position. So I'm going to want this in the middle like that. And then let's say I wanted 50% rates. So wind that back to 50% like that. and then go back, and you can see now it's added another line underneath that 100% there, which is my new rudder rate, and it's highlighted at the minute because I've got the switch in that position, but when I move the switch up you can see it's no longer highlighted. You can't really pick that up on the camera, to be honest, but it just shows you that it's active. That's how you set the rate, and if I wanted to I could go in there and add more rates and on different positions of the switch. So that's how you add rates. As an example, like I say, if you look at the aileron and elevator inputs there, so I've got 25%, then it goes to 75, then 100%. That's how I set my dual rates. And you can use any switch. Obviously 3-position switch works best depending on what sort of rates you want. You could use a 2-position switch if you wanted to do that, if you just want maybe 50% and 100. But I like to have the 3 options. And again, you can choose any switch you want to, but I just tend to find this one for me is the one I like to use for dual rates. And you'll find that on every single one of my models. The last setting I want to show you on my sort of base setup is around the timer. So I'll always set my timers to be a similar setup. Obviously the time is going to be different for different models, but the way I set the timer up is pretty much the same across the board. So if we just go into the model menu, and it's on this main menu here, I usually always have mine, particularly with electric models, I have mine set to the throttle percentage option, because you get different options here on the timer. So you can have either just on all the time as soon as you basically start going. You can have just throttle movement or throttle percentage, or you can just have as soon as you activate the throttle it comes on. And then if you want to, you can set the timer to be a switch as well if you prefer to do that, but I like to have mine set for throttle percentage. So what this means is it's quite a nice feature, and I'm sure lots of other radios do it, but it's certainly a good feature of Edge and Open TX, is it changes the timer based on the throttle position. So if you put the throttle right up, it actually counts down faster, but if you down at the bottom, it doesn't really count down at all, and obviously if you're in the middle, it counts down with a medium speed. So I tend to find that works really well for me, particularly with electric models. So I'd choose that, I'd set my time that I want, and then I like to have a minute call, so it'll shout out every time it hits a minute, so it'll say 2 minutes, then 1 minute, and then I like to have a countdown at 10 seconds. And again, this is all personal preference, of course. People might not like this, but it's what I like to do, and every single model I have is set up like this. So you can have this set to do a beep when it counts down, or in my case I like to use voice, so literally when it gets to 10 seconds it counts down from 10, 9, 8, 7 down to 1, so you know that it's time to land the plane before it runs out of battery. So that brings this video to a close. I hope you found that useful. If you've got any questions at all about setting it up, you know, particularly if you are new to this or new to RadioMaster, then put a comment and I'll respond to you. But equally, like I've said on my other RadioMaster videos, it's interesting to know what other people do, and if you've got particular settings that you like to use for every single model, then let us know in the comments and let's share that information, because someone might have an absolute bit of gold dust information that they use that everyone else can use as well. So if you've got anything like that, then please share it in the comments. That'd be great. If you've enjoyed the video, then please help me out by clicking the like button, and of course if you could subscribe as well, that would massively help me out. We're heading towards 1,000 subscribers, which is absolutely superb. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, so please help me out by hitting that subscribe button. And of course a massive thank you to everyone who has subscribed up to now. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed but you've got to the end of the video, then I really appreciate that as well. And thanks a lot for watching my video, and I'll see you soon for the next one.